Hi, and welcome to the Good Health Podcast. I'm your host, Nicole Good, a registered nutritional therapy practitioner and functional medicine practitioner. Join me as we explore thyroid, brain, and fatigue conditions with positivity. From Hashimoto's to multiple sclerosis, chronic fatigue to adrenal dysfunction, I've got you covered. With expert advice and tips to help you take action now and inspiring real patient stories from successful individuals who refuse to let their health hold them back. Start your journey to good health today. And don't forget to come and join the conversation on Instagram at good_health. That's GOODE. Or visit my website at nicolegoodhealth.com to find out more. On today's episode, we are welcoming Sandra Greenbank to the Good Health Podcast. Following graduation from the Institute for Optimum Nutrition, Sandra was one of the first few UK nutritional therapists to have specialised in the field of fertility back in 2009. Since then, she's had the privilege to help countless individuals and couples all over the world to conceive. After realising that there was a distinct shortage of skilled fertility nutrition experts due to a lack of available training for nutrition practitioners in this area, Sandra founded the Fertility Nutrition Center and created a unique 12-month training and mentorship program, Making Babies Naturally. This is a comprehensive and rigorous evidence-based course based on the experience and knowledge that she's gained over the years from working alongside doctors and consultants, research and study, and of course, working with her own clients. The Fertility Nutrition Center lists a directory of highly specialised fertility nutrition experts who have completed the 12-month training program with Sandra and who have committed to further support and learning as research in this constantly evolving field of nutrition and medicine evolves. Sandra's aim with this directory is to ensure that you as the patient are getting the very best, effective, but also safest advice and support possible from your practitioner. Let's jump straight into the conversation all around fertility. Sandra, welcome to the Good Health Podcast. It's great to have you here today.
Thank you for having me.
So I usually start by just asking people to tell me a little bit about themselves and what led you into the work of nutrition and also into your sort of particular area of fertility.
Okay, so I grew up in Sweden with an Italian dad and Finnish mum. And I think they've both had their own health problems. So lots of autoimmunity, some chronic fatigue, all of these things growing up. I could see that their lives, I could already tell then, that their lifestyle was, very stressful. There's a lot of smoking. And, I was thinking if they would just change their lifestyle, they would not have these problems. And then I came to England when I was about 18 and worked in TV and media. And it was all sort of very high stress, very high kind of energy job, I guess. And at some point I just got exhausted. And, I think we all have this sort of experience of going to the doctor and they were like, there's nothing wrong with you. And I was like, I'm just tired all the time. And they ran some blood tests. And of course, they were very basic and they tried to give me antidepressants several times. And I was like, no, I'm really not depressed. Like there's something else going on. And I saw this sign one day when I was walking to work and there was a sign in the window saying, come in and talk to a nutritionist. And I had a quick consultation with her because I was like, it can't hurt.
Yeah.
And of course, she gave me some very basic advice. It was like, cut out dairy. She had a bioresonance machine, I think, which I don't use, but, it was brilliant. She gave me some digestive enzymes, I think, and a B vitamin complex. Like, so simple, but it changed my life. Within weeks, I was like back to my old self. And I thought, I want to know where she studied. This is what I want to do because I can see now I can see how this can be so powerful.
Yeah.
And I'm going to change the world and everyone's going to listen to me. And of course that didn't happen. But this is about 20 years ago now. I studied for 4 years at the Institute for Optimum Nutrition. And I never look back. It's just such a lovely job to have, to be able to help people. Of course, it wasn't like what I thought it was going to be, where everyone was just going to flock to me and I was going to help everyone. It doesn't happen like that. It's a bit easier now, but back then things were a bit different. But yeah, so I worked in a really kind of high stress industry. I did focus on that initially because I could just see it so much in people, and also having seen my family, the impact of stress on their health over time. I did focus on that. And then there were a lot of people who were, particularly media, because it's so not compatible with family life. I think a lot of people tried for a baby later in life. And so I worked with quite a few people who tried to have a baby and couldn't get pregnant at the very start. And even during training clinic, and I really, really enjoyed that work, and I could really see the benefit, and the incredible results was so kind of, you get that dopamine hit every time someone sends this like amazing updates that they're pregnant or whatever. So that's what I've been doing now, 15 years. Yeah. And it's still such a lovely job to have.
It is a great job. I always think fertility as well must be such a nice area to be in, because like you said, you get, my friends works in fertility, and it's that job where you get the pictures of like, the pregnancy pictures get sent through. There's a real tangible result with it, isn't there? Of that, that you can see, which is lovely. It must be really nice for you when you get those updates coming through.
It's really lovely. And now I'm getting like secondary school pics from people.
That's so nice that they keep in touch, though. How nice you have those clients that do keep in touch like that.
We obviously don't always get those spectacular results. And it does come with a lot of trauma and distress and, upsetting sort of messages as well. But overall, it's, you feel like you're making a work, like compared to working in TV and media, like I feel like I'm doing something that's really worthwhile, and I've got a legacy now, and, I'm leaving something good behind.
Yeah. We've had quite a few people on the podcast actually who worked in TV and media, we've had a few actresses that have been on, we've had a few from producing, writing sort of side of the industry as well, who actually are now doing sort of retreats and things like that. So have gone into working in the wellness world, but they've all said the same thing, that even though they loved the job, the stress and the lifestyle that came with being in that media and TV sort of world was just so difficult to manage.
Yes, yeah, especially if you work on location or you work on live TV. Yeah, it's not a good lifestyle.
Yeah,
for the young people.
Yeah. And you picked up because you got into this. If you're saying you saw it in your parents, you obviously picked up on it very young, and you studied. You're saying you studied, was it 20 years ago now that you sort of?
So I started 2005. Yeah, so my God.
Yeah. That's, that's very early on really it's grown. It's still growing a lot now, isn't it? But it's, it's still got a long way to go, and it's still growing, but it is a lot more known now than it would have been back then. So you were kind of ahead of the curve back then to be looking at that even for yourself. You were sort of ahead of everybody else, weren't you? Ahead of the curve with it.
I remember going to parties and people would go, "Oh, so what do you do?" And then I'd be like, "Oh, I'm a nutritionist," and they would just glaze over and sort of try and like slowly walk backwards. Whereas like now it's like, oh, right, and everyone sort of has an idea of like the gut health, and they've got so many questions, and that's really great. But I think also the other side of that is, I find it really hard to look at what's out there on social media at the moment, and all this extremely confusing and very polarizing messaging. It's really, like, in some ways it's worse.
I think social media has made it worse, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And all the, the sort of influencers sort of side of it as well, of that there's always somebody promoting something or some product.
Something very angled, something very, I was so pleased when we had all these influencers who were able to raise awareness and to really raise kind of public
awareness and knowledge.
Just getting the word out there. And now it's like, hang on a minute, this is just really bad for everyone, because everyone's more confused than they've ever been.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think a lot of what we do now is having to cut through that noise, isn't it? And sort of help people to decide what they actually need to be listening to and what they don't necessarily need to be listening to. Yeah.
Yeah.
If we look at the fertility side of things, which is the sort of the stuff we're going to look at today, what age, because you sort of mentioned there that people in TV are having children later, and I think it's a general theme, I think, within society anyway, not just within the media. I think generally women are having children later. They want to, they want to have their own lives and get a job set up, and there's all this sort of things they want to do first.
Yeah. What
sort of age would you say women should start thinking about fertility, even if they're not necessarily ready to have children maybe at that point? But do you think is it something that we should be looking at prior to wanting to have a child?
Yeah, I think that we don't want to be sort of scaring people. And I think women are worried enough about that ticking clock and, the sitting on a time bomb. If you haven't met anyone by 35, it's like, should I freeze my eggs? But I think that we need to raise awareness a little bit about sort of what signs and symptoms you might want to look into when you're in your 20s, even if you're not thinking of having babies until for 10 years or 5 years or whatever it might be, that if you've got problems with your cycle, that's something you can fix actually there and then. And then, because the longer you've had an issue, the harder it's going to be, or the longer it's going to take to sort of fix it. And I don't want to sort of make like wild claims that we can kind of fix everything. But at the same time, young women tell me time and time again that they've been to the doctor because they have no periods, or they have very painful periods, or all of these things that can go wrong, and they go to the GP and they just get given a pill.
Yeah.
And then they might stay on a pill for 15 years, and then they wonder why they can't get pregnant when they come off the pill. And that pill creates a fake bleed, as it were.
Yeah.
And so you might feel quite normal because you have a bleed every month, or it's masking your symptoms, but actually it's never addressing the root cause of the symptoms. It's just like a sticking plaster. But underneath all of whatever's going on and driving the initial problem, if that's not addressed, it's always going to still be there and potentially be getting worse. That's one thing that I would encourage anybody to do, is make sure that your cycle's regular. Find out when you're ovulating, learn to read your body's signs and symptoms and signals. Cycle tracking, there's so many things now, there's so many apps that can be really helpful. And I think that all of us can actually track our ovulation, even if we're not trying for a baby. I think it's one of those vital signs of your body, that your body's always telling you that something's not quite right. If your cycle's not working properly, it's just one of those symptoms that's not, it means that something's not quite right. And it's something that I think is worth focusing on, because the first thing we do is ensure that the female partner is ovulating.
Yeah.
Without an egg, we can't get you pregnant.
Yeah.
And then the next step is making sure that the sperm is healthy. And then the next step is making sure that they meet. There's like a step by step. But if that's an issue, then fix it.
Yeah. Do you find that women, a lot of the time with cycles, tend to just kind of, because some of them sort of expect maybe to get sort of pain at that time of the month and cramps and things like this, that they sort of put up with more symptoms than we probably should do, or just sort of see it as normal and don't sort of question it?
Do I was thinking about this today when because I knew that you were going to probably ask me how I got into do now. And I remember being at work and I was like, I'm so tired all the time. And everyone I worked with was like, oh yeah, I'm so tired all the time too. And then I was like, well, this is just normal, because everyone feels like this. So I'm just normal. I don't have to do anything about this. But just because something is common doesn't mean it's normal or that you have to put up with it. I don't believe that women should just like power on through and be the same all through the month and just get on with it.
Yeah.
Or that you should expect to be able to do that. We're hormonally driven in a monthly cycle in a different way to men, because they have sort of fairly regular hormone output all the time. Whereas we have the estrogen, the first part of the cycle, which is high, and then we should have the higher progesterone. And those hormones have different influences on us. So you might find that you're more energetic at certain points, and when you're having your bleed, maybe you want to treat a little bit. And we should kind of honor our cycle and honor our needs. And maybe, I plan my diary around it as well, because I know some days I'm going to be much more kind of feeling like talking to people and being extrovert, and some days I just want to hide away and, maybe work on back of house stuff.
Yeah.
But I think that if you're finding that you're having pain that stops you from doing things you want to do, your moods are affecting your relationships, or you're feeling perhaps depressed a couple of days of the month, or things that are affecting your life more than sort of, I just feel like taking some time back and I'm just like going to sit on the couch with a hot water bottle tonight and watch my favorite program, then I think that's something that should be addressed, because, and a lot of the time it's just very simply some nutrient deficiencies that we can fix quite simply. where, for example, like I mentioned, the B vitamins, which I was given by this nutritionist a long time ago, they're there to help support our energy. They're there to help support, all the processes in our body. Magnesium as well is something that's frequently lacking. These are nutrients that are depleted by stress. They're depleted by poor sleep. They're depleted by excess alcohol consumption. All of the things that we do as young people, they're depleted by the contraceptive pill.
Yeah.
Even if you think you have quite a good diet, sometimes if your lifestyle and whatever it is going on in your life is actually depleting it faster than you can put it in, you're going to feel not well eventually. And it might be that we need a short-term course of supplements to kind of just replete your stores.
And I think that's the thing, isn't it? They are all relatively simple things to fix, aren't they? They are things that can be, I'm not saying, obviously not, some people have fertility issues that are a more complex problem, but when we're talking about this balancing of cycles, when we're younger, things like this, a lot of the time it is something relatively simple, like you said, like nutrient deficiencies, that there's a lot you can do for it. It's just, I think a lot of women are not aware that actually some of these symptoms might not be normal, and that there are things that they can do to support it.
Yeah. And also, they'll be told by the GP that there's nothing wrong with them. So then that's that. It's all in their head. That's the message, isn't it? And I mean, for example, if you're low in iron, you're going to be tired. It's a bit of a paradox. A low iron status can actually cause heavier bleeds. And then it sort of perpetuates the problem. And again, a low iron, talking about autoimmunity, can impact your thyroid, which is then does have a knock-on effect on your fertility. And it's usually something very simple to fix, not always with iron, but then, at the same time, you don't want to be taking iron supplementation if you don't need it, because then that's not good for you.
Yeah. And you've mentioned there, because I think when we talk about fertility, a lot of the time, a lot of the things you see, even on social media and things like that, we've talked about a bit of touched on the positive and negatives of social media, but a lot of the time what we see is female fertility. That's what gets talked about quite a lot. I think maybe women are a bit more open about talking about it. Even from the point of view of fertility experts, I think you see a lot on female fertility. But how important is male fertility in the picture? Because I think that doesn't get talked about as much. And there is a huge aspect that there is another partner in this situation in terms of getting pregnant. And
it takes two to tango. I mean, it's 50-50. Half of that baby is going to come from the male partner. That's assuming there's a male and a female having a baby. But, ultimately, you're going to need an egg and a sperm, wherever that comes from.
Yeah.
And I think that men historically or traditionally have been very much sidelined, which is not good for male mental health either, because they're watching their partner go through sometimes some really awful treatment in order to have their baby. Men should absolutely be part of the picture. And I think that fertility clinics are cottoning on to this now, very slowly.
Yeah, but getting there. And is there things that you can do for the male fertility in the same way? We've talked about some simple things you can do for the female fertility. Is it a similar picture? Is there things that you can do for the male fertility as well?
Absolutely. So, food, diet, lifestyle, exercise, toxic exposure, your gut health, all of those things, as I'm sure you've talked loads about on the podcast before, they're all applicable to both partners. Of course, there can be infections, which we screen for as well, which are they don't look, conventional clinics, they don't look at everything that we do.
Yeah.
But there can be structural problems as well. So if your tubes are blocked, or your men have tubes as well, where the sperm's supposed to travel through, and they could have had some trauma or something, undescended testicles perhaps as a child. And so we can't fix everything, but absolutely we need to look at what's going on and rule out the main suspects, I suppose.
Yeah.
And for sure, in terms of autoimmunity, we see a lot of undiagnosed thyroid disorders, particularly in women, but it's also really important for men to kind of keep on top of that, because it does impact your fertility significantly.
Yeah. And what is the impact? So you've mentioned there the autoimmunity. What is the impact of autoimmunity on fertility? Because I obviously work with autoimmunity, so this is a question I get asked an awful lot. Do you find it's particular conditions? Is it autoimmunity generally? You've mentioned thyroid, obviously, which we know is linked with fertility issues. And there's there are the sort of particular ones around PCOS and endometriosis and things like that. But what about autoimmunity generally, or is it specific conditions more?
I don't really subscribe to the idea that one autoimmune disease is different from another. It's just the expression kind of that express this. So we treat it the same. If you've got psoriasis, you've got a thyroid issue, or you've got whatever it might be, we still do the same checks, we do the same work. We go back to the gut, we look at your inflammation, we look at your nutrient stores, all of the same stuff. But we do, like I said, thyroid comes up so much. It can make it harder for you to get pregnant and stay pregnant. I think a lot of the autoimmune issues we see is to do with inflammation, isn't it? Yeah. And inflammation in the fluids surrounding the pelvic organs has a direct impact on egg health and ovarian health. And of course, the gut is next to those organs. So we need to kind of put a lid on inflammation. Some inflammation is good. We do need some in sort of normal levels. We don't want to sort of eliminate inflammation or kind of overdo it with antioxidants, because particularly in men, there's some research that shows that overusing of antioxidants is not good for male fertility. Yeah, thyroid. We see celiac. I test a lot for celiac, and I've noticed that a lot of people with celiac disease have only one symptom, and that's infertility.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
Yeah. Or they might say that they have sort of aches and pains, or some non-specific kind of inflammatory skin issues, or
brain fog, things like that.
Brain fog, or we see, if someone was run a blood test and someone's like low across the board, I straight away will ask for a celiac test, because it's like, why are they so low in everything?
Yeah.
What's going on with their absorption, And so that surprised me initially. Now I'm not surprised. Now I just make sure that people get checked and they go, well, I don't have gut symptoms. But, not everyone with celiac disease has gut symptoms. You can have all sorts of things going on that you would never imagine has anything to do with your gut or with celiac. What else do we see? A lot of eczema. I mean, of course, loads of endometriosis, which I suppose, it's debatable with where that actually comes from. But I do believe that the immune system is involved.
Yeah.
But a fair few clients with rheumatism, which has been interesting. Of course, other inflammatory gut conditions.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we have them all, don't we?
Yeah. So there isn't really a sort of, and thyroid obviously is quite heavily linked, but generally across the board, any autoimmune disease can have that sort of impact on fertility. And probably to do with the inflammation.
Possibly. I mean, is it the fault of the autoimmune disease, or is it just, I sort of see it more as a symptom, or it's sort of like a signal. For me, it signals that something's not quite right. And we are like detectives, aren't we? We're like, what's going on with this person? And we're sort of going, is it the ovaries? Is it the brain signaling that's not fine? Why is this person not ovulating properly? Is it because the brain isn't putting out the right signals? What's going on with the brain? Is it because there's a gut condition? Is it because, and if somebody's got an autoimmune diagnosis, it's another clue. And it's another piece of the puzzle that kind of directs my further inquiry.
Yeah, it's that whole body approach, isn't it?
Yeah, but there's never, taking my mum as an example, she had chronic fatigue, and that kind of, the onset of that was maybe 5 years after she had a hysterectomy. And of course, back then they used to just whip it out for like any...
Yeah.
They were like, oh, you have period problems. Let's just take your uterus out and you'll be fine. This will fix your problem.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, no, that trauma is triggering potentially it's like a domino effect, isn't it? But you might not put two and two together because it's a long time. The time lag is, quite long, because this is what happens. We set the scene a long time before the symptoms appear.
Yeah. And that's why we use the sort of timeline with people, isn't it? Build that timeline of their medical history. And because sometimes there's things that went on way before they're connecting the dots that, that we can see that have impacted health today that happened a long time ago. What about PCOS? Because it's one that a lot of people have sent questions in. When I said I was coming on the podcast with you, a lot of people sent questions in about PCOS. Is that something that you see a lot? How do you find that impacts fertility? And I think the other question that really kind of came through was, can things be done for people with PCOS to help them in terms of fertility?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the reasons why we get so many PCOS clients is because they're not ovulating and have been told that they need IVF treatment, but they are too heavy. The BMI is too high. Mm-hmm. And of course, they've been trying to lose weight all their life.
Yeah.
And so they're stuck between a rock and a hard place. They can't get the treatment, and they're not ovulating. So, and it is hard. It is harder to lose weight. I mean, not everyone is overweight with PCOS, but generally that's the picture we see. But again, we have to go and look at what's going on. Is it gut related? Is it even PCOS? A lot of the time people are misdiagnosed and it's actually hypothalamic amenorrhea we're looking at, or hyperlactin. So again, it's kind of looking at what's going on for that particular person. In terms of strategy for PCOS, always check vitamin D, because and any autoimmune disease, I suppose vitamin D is that absolute key point. And we would look at that for anybody anyway, trying for a baby. But particularly in PCOS, is very commonly insufficient, which is such an important nutrient to make sure that you've got enough. Avoid over-exercising or starving yourself, because again, we're looking at brain health when we're looking at making sure that you're ovulating well. And if your brain is sensing that you're stressed because you're over-exercising, you're kind of on your Peloton 5 days a week and kind of doing HIIT, that's sending signals to the brain to say, well, we're stressed right now. And then if you're also under-eating, your brain's going, well, we're not getting enough food. We're running away from, we're in starvation mode. We're running away from dangerous animals all day long. Let's not make a baby now because this is not the right time. So actually, it's just helping your body your body's doing what it's supposed to be doing, and with the information it's getting a lot of the time. And so you have to make sure that your brain gets the right information in order that then it can, because your body's self-healing, and so that it can do what it's supposed to be doing.
Yeah, I think that's a really important message for people, actually. So I think a lot of the time people, particularly that I see with that, the autoimmunity, come to me and they're like, I think they feel like their body is broken and not doing what it should do. And, I think that is that message of actually your body's doing exactly what it should be doing. Even in autoimmune diseases, your immune system is doing what it should be doing for the messages that it's getting. Yeah. But it's making sure that actually your body's getting the right messages. And I think that's really important for people to understand, because a lot of the time they do feel quite broken and like things are not working and not going well. And also that message that we can change that signaling as well, that the body and our brain and our cells are getting.
Yeah.
So you set up the Fertility Nutrition Center, which I wanted to talk to you about a little bit. And you train practitioners there to work with infertility. And I know a few people that have been through and sort of studied with you and are now working. So tell us a little bit about how you got into doing that and why you got into doing that.
So I spent about 10 years working one-to-one with, or one-to-two with couples who are trying to conceive. And then I was getting lots of inquiries from practitioners going, I've got this client, can you help me? I have no idea what I'm doing. And so I was mentoring clients or practitioners one-to-one a lot. Like, it took me so much time and effort to learn what I needed to learn, because it was sort of very niche at the time. Now there's a lot of fertility nutritionists out there, which is brilliant. But I went to webinars and I went to courses and I worked in IVF clinics, and, was asking so many questions and trying things with clients. And there was no training that would just put it all together. Mm-hmm. And so I decided to do it as in a group setting. So I was like, why am I sitting here and helping people one-to-one with their client base when I can just do it in a group setting, and then actually we can all learn from each other. Yeah. So I put together a course, and it was just so popular. And it goes into, egg health, sperm health, DNA, epigenetics, pregnancy, miscarriage is huge, obviously. And just put together all the data and everything that I'd learned over time, just to help, because also I couldn't cope with the volume of clients I was getting. I was just so overwhelmed with people wanting to work with me. And so I felt like I needed to train more people so that there was enough people out there to help everybody that needed the help, because also quite upsetting looking at how busy the IVF clinics would be, and knowing in my heart that not all of the people who have IVF need it. My other motivation with the Fertility Nutrition Center is that, together we're better able to go out there and deliver the message and make sure that people who need to hear the message, that it's reaching people, because we can all sit alone at home and, try our best, but it's just hard on your own, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And so the practitioners, they do this course with you, and then how can people find out more about working with the practitioners that have been trained under you?
We have a directory of people. So those who have trained with me, they will have a certificate on their website. So you can look for the Fertility Nutrition Certificate of Completion on the website. We also have a core group of practitioners that just want to work with fertility, and they have joined the Fertility Nutrition Center kind of practitioner group, where we meet every week and support each other still with all of everybody's caseload. And we have a directory of those practitioners on our website. So you can book a free discovery call with any of our practitioners from there to find out more about working with them. But yeah, just look for the certificate of completion of the course.
Yeah, and we'll link the website below as well so that people can find it. Because I think the important thing with fertility is people knowing that the options are out there and that the information is out there, and that there is this possibility to work with people like yourself.
I think also making sure that your practitioner is adequately trained. I'm not aware of any other training that actually is as comprehensive as mine, that puts everything together with the support as well. A lot of people want to help other people with fertility problems. They've had their own, but actually I have noticed, obviously, over the years working with people that there are practitioners out there who are not as knowledgeable as they could be. And I actually think it's inexcusable to work with somebody if you're not fully trained in this particular area, because the time, it's so time critical.
Yeah.
And we do run out of time. Sadly, you can't have a go and see what happens. You've got to get it right, because, if somebody's going in for a treatment cycle, they spend a lot of money on IVF. You want to make sure that you're not missing something. That's a message for practitioners. Like, if you're not completely confident, get support, get training, or contact one of our practitioners in the directory. They're all happily do mentoring as well, just to make sure that the clients are getting the very best and safe and efficient support possible.
I think that's what's great about the Fertility Nutrition Center that you set up, is just that you said, like, where you're meeting still and sharing caseloads and talking about it, because it is, like you said, it is often a time-sensitive issue. You haven't necessarily got all the time in the world to work on it with people and to make sure you're getting everything right. I think that's what's so good about what you've set up.
And the studies and the data is like constantly changing. The landscape is constantly changing. So we're keeping up to date together, because as soon as somebody reads something, we update people, or someone might do some training, and then we update, we invite experts all the time. If there's something that we feel like we need more information about, the data and studies, which is just like so overwhelming.
Yeah.
So
what about the stage? What about the sort of postpartum stage? Do you find people need support in that? Because it's an area that, we talk about fertility a lot and the getting pregnant, but we don't often touch on that postpartum period, particularly for the female, obviously. But is that something that you help people work on as well? Is it an important time to work on nutrition and health?
Yeah, I think that if you worked with somebody before you get pregnant, generally you're going to be well throughout your pregnancy and beyond. We're making sure that you're not deficient in any nutrients that you need because what happens is actually that baby generally gets what baby needs at the expense of mum if there isn't enough. So this is where you can get brain fog, prenatal depression, postnatal depression. And so we want to make sure that mum stays well, because if mum's well, baby's going to be, if mum's happy, baby will be happy. If mum's unhappy, that's when things start to unravel. So that's one thing. So, if you haven't worked with anyone before pregnancy, make sure that you book in with somebody to help you, support you through pregnancy, so that you're, just able to have as positive as possible experience of pregnancy, labor, birth, and postpartum, the fourth trimester. Labor itself can be triggering for autoimmune disease specifically, where we're looking for that sort of potential to trigger something that you might, high risk for, I suppose.
I see a lot of thyroid patients who have developed thyroid, Hashimoto's particularly. I see a lot of Hashimoto's post-pregnancy, postpartum.
That's the one thing what I would always look out for postpartum thyroid issues for sure, because when you have a new baby, that's the last thing you need is to have these problems. And, we can't always prevent everything from happening, but we can work on sort of trying our best to kind of get our ducks in a row and keep an eye out for it as well.
Yeah.
Because again, it's one of those times where, if you go to the GP and you go, I'm tired all the time, and they're like, well, you've got a new baby. This, it's just normal. And you're thinking, really? Like, I'm meant to feel like this. And, particularly if you've had fertility problems as well, like the pregnancy is such a white knuckle ride of anxiety. And then you have the additional guilt of feeling, not being euphoric about finally having that baby in your arms. And there's so much kind of mental and emotional that goes into all of this that sort of forms part of your health picture.
Yeah. I had, there's an episode of the podcast with Frankie Gaff on from Made in Chelsea, and she developed thyroid postpartum, and she talks very much about that on the episode. If people are listening, want to jump back and listen to that one, but she talks a lot about how she just felt tired after, sort of that was her big thing, was sort of feeling really tired. But she was like, well, I've got a baby, like I should feel tired, and put it down to that. And it was only when she started sort of losing weight, and her parents, that she said her parents really noticed it, because they knew her so well, that they said, actually, something's not quite right. But again, she said, like herself and her doctors, you're putting it down to just that you've got a baby, you're going to be tired, you're rushed off your feet, you're not sleeping, and it's normal. And she sort of went through that experience.
Yeah. I've actually, one of the clients that actually really hammered this home to me is, I think her baby's now 5, I think, but she came to me to help her get pregnant she had thyroid issues and she wanted to get pregnant, and got her pregnant. That was fine. But she was so tired and she had gut problems during pregnancy. And I ran a stool test and I was like, I can't really see much going on. But I would write to the GP several times and they just fobbed her off and they said, it's normal. And baby was, I think, 4 or 5 months old. She was diagnosed with bowel cancer. And she had just been popped off, and she basically like sleepwalked through her pregnancy, and she had 2 other babies or children. And it's just inexcusable, really. But I mean, what can you say? What can you do? Yes, it's normal, but if you genuinely feel, I think we need to listen to our gut, sort of what our gut is telling us a lot of the time, pardon the pun. But, if you genuinely feel that something isn't right, you just go to a different doctor, order a private test. I mean, this particular client, there was no way she could have had, because she needed a colonoscopy. So, she probably wouldn't have got a colonoscopy without a referral. But it took me several letters to just go, please, we'll just refer her. She had private healthcare. So there was no reason for the GP not to refer her, because it wasn't going to cost the NHS anything anyway. And luckily she did. I mean, she's 5 years clear now. So
it's that message of advocating for yourself, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think, which I talked a lot, because obviously autoimmune, again, it's one of those things that you get that wealth of symptoms sometimes before, and you're not in the box of, you're not ticking all the check boxes to get a diagnosis, but there's something going on, and it can be quite a long period of time where there is that something going on and it gets left. I talk a lot to people about learning to advocate for yourself, listening to your body, knowing what's normal for you and what's not normal for you, and looking for patterns as well in your, in your health, in your history, and learning to speak to the doctors as well, and sort of manage that, oh, it's just normal, you're fine, sort of message that we can often get. And it is really important to do that. That case is a prime example of learning to do that.
I think so too. I mean, a lot of the time, I don't blame the doctors, because they have like 8 minutes with each client, and you go in and you're like, I really just don't feel well. And they're like, what's the problem? And you sort of can't really sort of express it or formulate it, or it's very diffuse. And so it can really help to have a conversation with one of us, and you're like, okay, how do you feel? Let's write this down. And I should go in with the list.
Yeah.
This is how I feel. I have brain fog. I have this. I have that. Please, can I have a thyroid test? I feel cold all the time. Or you can help your GP by listing the symptoms. But sometimes when you get in there, you just can't even think straight.
No. And you can't, and they sort of say, it was particularly if you've got that wealth of symptoms, and they sort of say, well, what's wrong with you? You start you sort of start listing a few, and you can quite easily, because I think as well, you've only got, like you said, 8 minutes or whatever it might be, you sort of forget a lot of the things. How many times have people said to me, oh, I walked out the doctors and thought I should have asked that, or I should have told them about that, or, so yeah, having a list, thinking beforehand about what you want to talk to them about, that it can really make a difference. I had that with my own diagnosis. I was getting nowhere, and I actually went to a new GP, not because there was anything wrong with my old one, but we moved areas, so I was under a new GP. I actually we sat down with him, and this was pre-getting a diagnosis. So I didn't know what was wrong with me at the time. It was just that typical autoimmune picture of tons of symptoms and didn't know what was happening, and they would fluctuate and it was all over the place. And he sat me down and he just said, right, let's pretend you've never been to a doctor before. You've never seen, and I'd been to tons of doctors by this point, but he was like, pretend you'd never been to one. What symptoms are going on for you right now? And let's sort of deal with that and send you to, do the referral as we would from what's going on right now today. And that's actually what led to me getting the diagnosis. And sometimes it is almost starting again and stripping back and just thinking about that story, what your story is, and being able to tell it well.
Yeah, but I also think that, I often do recommend people see another GP for a second opinion. Yeah. And I myself now, there's a list of GPs I will see, and there's a list of GPs that I'll just be like, no, I'm not seeing them because of the things they've told me before. I mean, I remember going in because I had I lost my period for a while. And the GP was like, so I was like, oh, I've my cycles, I missed a cycle here, and this happened. And he said, the only thing I'm interested in knowing about your cycle is how many days you bleed.
Really?
I'm not interested in any other information. I was like, what?
Gosh.
I was like, that's the least important information. What? And so I'm never seeing him again. Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? And, I always, if one of my kids always gets, if they get prescribed antibiotics, I always make a point of asking, do you think they should take probiotics with these or afterwards? Because that gives me so much information about whether I ever want to see this person again. If they're super dismissive, I'm like, okay, close-minded GPs, I would rather have someone with an open mind. I'm not expecting them to know everything there is about gut health, but if they have a closed mind, I'm not interested.
Yeah, absolutely agree. So for those listening who are thinking about sort of wanting to get pregnant, what would be your sort of top tips for fertility? What would be your suggestions to them of things that they could implement straight away? I presume you're going to say work with somebody who knows what they're doing as well. But what are some of the things that you would sort of advise for people that are looking to get pregnant?
So, I mean, it's just looking at your signs and symptoms. Learn, find out when you're ovulating. Learn to understand your body's signs and signals. What I mean by that is you might want to try and track your temperature and keep a log either in an app or on a little piece of paper where you can see the rise and fall in temperature. There's lots of information online where you can find out how to do that. You can track your cervical mucus, which changes, and if you want to sort of go a step beyond, you can track what your cervix is doing, if it's high, if it's low, there's lots of signs that you can use to really understand, because one of the most important things is obviously knowing when you ovulate. And we're all told that we ovulate on day 14, which is completely untrue. That's just the average day, but most of us actually ovulate on a different day. If you want to know when it's happening so that you can then pinpoint it when you do want to get pregnant. And, if you're spotting or if you've got particularly heavy periods or anything like that, I would just work on fixing that. So, you could buy a book. You don't have to see a professional straight away if you're, not wanted to get pregnant tomorrow. There's lots of period health books on the market now, which are, really helpful. I think if you do have some niggly signs and symptoms, again, try and figure out what's going on. Maybe have a chat with a practitioner. Maybe look at your diet. Are you getting enough? I always talk about eating the rainbow. It sounds naff, but it's actually really important.
Yeah.
Get as many plant points as you can. Track how many plants you eat in a week. See if you can challenge yourself to go to 30. And we count herbs and spices and things like that as well. Yeah. But, we don't want, it's great to eat. If you're eating 5, 7, maybe 8 portions of vegetables in a day, that's brilliant. But if they're the same every day,
yeah,
you're limiting yourself potentially. And actually, what you want to do is have a wide variety. Look up the clean 15 and the dirty dozen lists of foods online, because there are some foods that are better if you choose organic. But I know food is expensive nowadays. So actually choosing the ones that are important, apples, pears, spinach, they always come up top, don't they? Strawberries, look up the ones that the clean 15 are the ones that you don't have to worry so much about. Male partner, absolutely no smoking. Like that's just got to go, vaping included, but female partner as well. But, that just has to go. Alcohol, try to limit your alcohol intake. Actually, rather than kind of listing lots of different things, what I try to say to people is, men and women, what would you do if you were pregnant now?
Yeah.
Because if you were pregnant now, and that includes men, if you were pregnant, would you have that drink? If you were pregnant, would you have that, whatever it is?
Yeah.
Because you are carrying that material that's going to go on to become a baby. And you're equally responsible for that genetic material. And, the egg also carries lots of nutrients and things that helps create and grow the embryo and sustain it energetically. And so that's kind of just a very simple way to look at it.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you have to become a monk and, have no fun and meditate 5 hours a day. Like, I don't know, but, just really bear in mind what your lifestyle looks like. Fix your sleep. If sleep is a problem, absolutely fix it. If you don't exercise, get some exercise into your routine. If you're doing ultra marathons, step it back a bit. It's all just about balance.
Yeah. And that's interesting, isn't it? Because I think people don't look at the side of pulling back things like exercise. It's always like, is everybody doing enough exercise? And we don't often look at the side, actually, is there somebody out there who's doing too much? Is there too much of that stress on the body?
Yeah, there's quite a lot of research actually that shows, I think it's well known that it's women athletes have lots and lots of problems with their ovulation and their fertile health. But for men also, I think it's the inflammation, the, high intensity exercise, a lot of it over a long period of time will increase your levels of inflammation to a point where it tips the balance where your body can't really quite deal with it. And so you do need to step that back. Also, it's the heat to the testicles, potentially if they're cycling or getting very hot. That's not good for male fertility, although that's something that's quite quickly fixed. We just need 3 months to fix that. You don't need to sort of stop exercising for that reason, sort of several years ahead of time. But just generally bear in mind, heat. If you're a chef, if you're a male chef and you're standing around like hot ovens all day long, that's maybe something you need to look at, trying to cool your testicles down. There's special pants for that purpose even. Don't switch your seat heater on in the car if you're commuting in the car a lot. They're just very simple things really, but I think, we all need to know what we should be doing for our health. But sometimes, like we talked about the messaging online as well, and it can be so overwhelming with all of the things you should be doing according to online influencers, get up at 5:30 a.m. to meditate. Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Just put that thought out of your head because you need to sleep.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, you shouldn't be doing juice fasts to detoxify, like all these extreme things. Just don't do it.
Yeah. It's all about balance, isn't it? I think that's...
Yeah. And you don't have to be 100% eating, only fertility approved foods, whatever. It's fine. It's fine to have a day off or go out for a meal every so often, as long as you're good most of the time. Or I don't want to say good or bad, but, you have a decent diet and lifestyle most of the time. That means that you become resilient enough that it doesn't matter if you overdo it at a party or, because it's really important to nourish your soul as well and see your friends and have connections.
I always have that message with my clients. I think it's really important that a lot of these journeys can feel quite restrictive and you feel like you can't enjoy life anymore. And I think that's equally as important, it's one of the parts that is about balance and is as equally important as nourishing your body with the food. I think you've got to socialize and have that fun, and it's part of life, it's community, and that's important too. But it's just, like you say, it's making sure that you're doing again, don't like to use the words good and bad, but doing all the things you should be doing on the other days and outside of it. But it is finding that balance, isn't it?
It's finding the balance. And, people always ask me what's the best diet. And the answer is always going to be the Mediterranean diet.
Yeah.
And there's a Mediterranean diet pyramid, actually, and it's fairly new, but it's at the very base of it. It has dancing and to eating with friends and walking. And it's all things that you do together at the very foundational basic level. And I love that image.
That's included.
That's included. And, one of the best things you can do if you feel like you don't really know what to cook, go and buy yourself a Mediterranean cookbook.
Yeah.
And there's lots obviously out there because that, and try to find joy in learning to cook those meals and enjoy them together.
Mm.
And, rather than feeling then restricted, you're expanding your food intake or your food choices.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I think that's really good advice. So how can people find you? Because I know there's lots, we'll put the website for the Fertility Nutrition Center below. But how can people find you? Because I know you have podcasts and Instagram and all of this sort of thing.
Got a podcast called Fertility Foundations. We talk about lots of different subjects, obviously, on there to do with fertility. I'm on Instagram and I post very sporadically under Sandra. I don't even know what my handle is. Sandra Greenbank _fertility, I think.
We'll put it below.
Fertility Nutrition Center also is on Instagram. We obviously have the website with the directory. We contact us. And yeah, I think that's it. We will be at the fertility show as well. We're there every year. So, if anyone's thinking of going, come and see us. Make sure you have a chat with us there.
Brilliant. We'll put all the links for all of those below the episode as well in the show notes so people can easily find you and link through. And then if they've got any questions, they can reach out and get in touch with your team as well.
Thanks so much.
But thank you so much for coming on today. Really enjoyed having a conversation with you.
It's been lovely. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Good Health Podcast. Do share the episode with anyone who you think it may benefit or who may enjoy it. And help me spread the word by rating the episode or leaving a review. If you want more, you can find other episodes in the series on your podcast app or sign up to my free newsletter. Not only will you get information on new episodes launching, but we cover lots of health topics with the Ask Nicole section where you can send in your questions, my favorite recipes, my favorite products, tips and tricks to help you on the road to good health and much more. You can sign up free of charge at nicolegoodhealth.com/newsletter. Also linked below. I hope you have a lovely week. Don't forget to hit subscribe and I'll see you next time.